Hey guys, so I want to do this thing where all in September, every other day, I want to bring out a video, and I want to bring out high-level hero guides all through September. Up to date to 2020. While they might not all be up to date because I'm actually scheduling out a huge portion of these, they will be up to date for the most part, especially for heroes that might not change that much. And there is going to be a couple sponsors, so I apologize that about 30 seconds to a minute out of each of the videos is going to be about the sponsor. Today's sponsor is going to be Geno Palette. And Geno Palette is, if you've ever had that time where you've heard someone say, oh, well, I tried that diet, it didn't work for me, but this diet worked for me, and it's a diet that you've tried and it didn't work for you. And I'm not even talking about weight loss. I mean, weight loss is definitely a big factor about diets. I'm talking also about just people that are trying to build muscle. They feel like the protein's not working as much for them, and then other people, it's just everything in their diet just works out fine. Well, Geno Palette found that the majority of this is caused by our genes, and there's actually an entire science behind what genes you can calculate and what you can do from that. So make sure to use the link down below, and if you use the coupon code NotParadox, you'll save 20 bucks on any of their services. Their services start at $40 if you've already had a genetic testing, and if you've never had a genetic testing, they do have a package for that as well. It's a little pricey, but sometimes when you really just want to know what kind of diet's gonna give you the most nutrition based on your genetics, it's kind of a neat little gimmick there, so you guys can definitely check that out. Make sure to use coupon code NotParadox. So once again, guys, every other day in September, I am going to be doing a video for high-level hero guides, where I'm going to be breaking down competitive games, generally the finals, semifinals of recent events. NGS happened in July, and so we're going to be breaking down a lot of the NGS grand finals, as well as finals, semifinals, and then also at the same time, we're going to be breaking down Heroes Lounge. We're going to be breaking down Panda Cup, all of the recent events that's happened in the last 3 months or so. I am going to be breaking down, and you guys are going to be getting high-level hero guides, learning from the best throughout that. We're going to be starting off with Junkrat. Junkrat is being played by GotFilth. GotFilth has been a competitive player ever since HEC has dropped. He's been on multiple teams which have won NGS in different seasons, as well as won different tournaments along the way. Junkrat's an interesting hero because especially on Braxis, the damage you deal is rather low for trying to bully people out of the objective point. So it gets rather difficult to hold the point for very long. So they ended up drafting Rexar to hold top point for the first half of the game, where Junkrat will start to gain value a little bit later. Now, the build that I recommend on Junkrat is a little bit different to get a little bit more value in the early portions of the game, where I like extra wound timers and I like taste for explosion. If you are with a coordinated team, blow them up into trap build can actually be extraordinarily effective at setting up for your team. You set up a trap, which then is going to give your team increased damage, and then you can also set up a bomb to send whoever gets hit by the trap towards your team to get a lot more value. So you can see he's now doing increased damage to this target because he did just blow him up, and he still has his trap available. So great job on the Imperius for being able to get out from that. But Boom Power allows it to where if you hit an enemy hero with Concussion Mine, reduce its cooldown by 10 seconds. That makes it a 6-second cooldown on your W, and you're going to see him abusing that alongside Blow Him Up, which after you hit them with a mine or a trap, you increase Junkrat's damage to him for only basic attacks and basic abilities by 25%. And that's really the basic idea of what GotFilth plans on doing here, is just abusing the traps, the zoning, and he'll even use his traps to peel for his team sometime. But in this case, the Imperius is playing pretty aggressive, so he just ends up tossing out a trap to be safe. So despite the fact that his damage is going to be a little bit lower than, let's say, something like a KT, the amount of utility that he brings to the team makes it to where he has a ton of value for his team. Now, that's where I would recommend, if you are going to be playing Junkrat, you might want to adjust it just a teeny bit in your earlier talents to be a little bit less team-oriented and a little bit more self-sufficient, which is why I like extra wound timers and taste for explosions. But if you happen to be playing with a couple friends, then you may want to try out this build, because it can allow you to have a lot more effect by just abusing the concussion mine. So you can see he generally throws a lot of concussion mines. And he's not always focused on doing the concussion mines to set up for a kill. Sometimes he does concussion mines just to disrupt the team and just to zone, which is something that we can all learn from just a little bit because it is rather effective. And now we have Sticky Wicket. I love this talent. I thought this talent was busted when they gave him his rework. 2-second silence I mean, that's essentially Stukov's combo before level 13, and you can do it with a single ability. And your team can just sit around the trap and be ready to blow up someone right as they get hit by that silence. But at the same time, where Stukov's combo can happen at any point, his can only happen where the traps are. So I would say Stukov's combo, it's hard to compare, is how I would say it. It's hard to compare. So right here we have, again, just a quick fight and a lot of extra damage. Now remember, he's stutter stepping and also throwing his frag launcher in between his shots. This is something that you kind of have to do if you want to be able to even keep up on damage as Junkrat, because it is kind of difficult to keep up on damage as Junkrat. Purely because Raynor just does more pure DPS than Junkrat does. So it's definitely going to be something that you want to be stutter stepping, adjusting, and being able to answer it. But with that being said, you can see he's just doing whatever he can. Now, this is another thing, too, that you're going to see him do a lot, which is he doesn't immediately run away from Samuro. He wants to see first if it's the real one, so he usually tests it with a Q because the clones have less health. And if it is the real one, he'll usually jump away. And if it's not the real one, oftentimes he'll wait for a minute or two to see if he can't get a steel trap or a concussion mine off, which is pretty risky. I would imagine if you go Dirty Trickster, you could definitely go with that, because then if Samuro gets you low health, then you might be able to just, like, blow him up. But if not, it is very risky to go with that. A lot of what he does is just calculated. Like, he just waits, and he'll throw out a few abilities, and he doesn't really do anything major. He just kind of throws out a couple abilities and then sits back. Right here is a time that throwing a W here would be great at zoning. You could also throw your E here. And it's something that I would imagine you're just going to go for anyways. But, damn, man, I have to say that Samuro player is just insanely good. Constantly jumping around, super annoying. You see that he starts off with a W. This is something that you do to prevent the enemies from trying to fight you on a boss or a camp. Something that you should almost always do with Junkrat is you should be trying to do this. You should be trying to do camps that the enemies might contest, because they can't contest it because you just knock them off with Concussion Mine. Especially with the lower cooldown with Boom Pow, allows you to consistently contest a camp or a boss. And so if you, like, I've said this before during like the Mei review, as I said, Mei's a great hero to be fighting under a camp, or to fight on a camp point, and Junkrat's the same way. If you ever want to invade, Junkrat's great for invading camps. You won't do a lot of extra damage, but you'll displace people enough that you can steal the camp, and potentially even displace them over walls that they won't be able to get back to rejoin the fight. But do you see how often he's throwing out this mine? It's a lot of disruption. Level 10, he takes Riptire. Riptire is pretty much exclusively used in the competitive scene, as it's just instant burst, up to 1,000 damage to a target at level 10, which is half the health of a Junkrat. Potentially a little less than half the health of Tassadar. So if you ever catch Tassadar at half health, you pretty much just blow him up. You don't really need to do anything else other than that. He pokes a lot pretty far away. I mean, it's not bad for this. He also uses his ult to clear up a lot of the objective. It clears up all the Banelings and a lot of the Zerglings, and even gets a lot of the Hydralisks down by about 90% of their health. So it's not bad, and it does make it a little bit more worth it to bring Junkrat onto Braxis, because the only objective that they end up losing this game ends up being an objective that he almost just free clears. So I really like the way that he plays this out. But he still hasn't really been getting, arguably, that much value, right? I mean, he's getting a lot of poke, he's set up a few kills, and he's prevented them from losing the objective. He's also helped them win a camp, but nothing really that extraordinary right now. The biggest thing that I would personally learn from this game is use your W more if you're using Boom Pow. He uses it a lot as a disruption, which is great in team fights, but I feel like he could even be using it just a little bit more. I do really think that his stutter stepping is very good, and it's been the reason that he's gotten a lot of the kills that I think lesser Junkrat players wouldn't be able to get. And then right here, he gets dropped. His trait doesn't do anything to the... I mean, it just does damage to the clones. We'll fast forward through this portion of the death as we end up going into what his level 13 talent is going to be, which at level 13, generally people have two options. Ripper Air used to be the old talent that almost everyone would take on this tier, purely because you could... I mean, he was one of the few heroes you could actually triple soak, because using Ripper Air was faster than using your mount in a lot of cases, and it allowed it to where you could actually triple soak on smaller maps because you could get around very easily. And it's going to make it to where whether he hits an enemy or he hits himself, the cooldown is going to be shaved considerably off of your W. What we've been seeing more in the competitive scene is gotta trap them all. Something that he decides not to take, but what it does is it reduces the cooldown of your trap. And this is a really bold play that does not pay off at all, but if you see, this is something that he actually does quite a bit, and this is actually a strategy that's used in Overwatch, but I'll explain why it's used in Overwatch more. Well, while he's dead, I'll explain it, or he's not dead. So in Overwatch, what people will do is they will jump in with Concussion Mine, and they'll jump with the second Concussion Mine, and then they'll get in the middle of their team, they'll use Riptire, and they'll die while casting Riptire, but your Riptire still goes off even if you're dead in Overwatch, where it doesn't in this game. Your passive of dropping all of the bombs will generally kill one person, and then your Ripper Air or your Riptire will kill another person. And so it's a method that's used in Overwatch to like quickly kill two people for just one. But it's a little strange to see it in HOTS, because if you die on Junkrat, you're not actually guaranteed to get 2 kills. So he does go for the ult right here. Remember, it can do about half an assassin's health, but the Q on Tassadar just does so much damage, it doesn't matter. And there you go, another pull into the team. So as far as getting picks, near the late portions of the game, his placements of his W are what leads to his team pretty much closing out this entire game. He's placing them in places that either zone out the enemies, or he'll just set it out, or he'll throw it out really quick to have the enemies just get tossed right in the middle of his team. And remember, he likes to go for bosses a lot. He likes to go for bosses and camps a lot because he has the potential of throwing out that concussion mine. So right here, they just hold the point for a little bit. He throws out a W just to hold the point for just a tad longer, and he throws out a couple Qs to get a little bit of poke damage. Nothing really much. They're against a Malfurion, so this poke damage is all negligible, but at the same time, he can still throw these out and get a lot of value. Right here, he's being chased down, and again, do you see what I was saying? He was being chased down, but he waited. He wanted to see which one was the real one, and he wanted to see what they could do first, and it actually ends up leading to the kill of Samuro, which again, lesser Junkrat would have ended up getting killed either by Samuro, or they would have not led to the Samuro kill because they wouldn't have been able to, they would have reacted too early with knocking them away, and then Samuro would have just gotten away. So again, he's just trying to be as disruptive as possible. His disruption ends up giving Maiev more time to live, and ends up giving Maiev enough time to live to get a heal from Rhaegar, and then Maiev hits a fountain and then backs. I don't ever like hitting a fountain and then backing, because you're going to get full health from the back anyways. I would rather back and then still have a fountain available, but I guess when you start getting this late in the game, well, I mean, what are the fountains worth, right? So he uses Ripper Air to get to the objective fast. He throws out a Q to reveal this bush first, and then he goes to hold this point. And this is something, and again, like I said, he's moving faster than mount speed if you do this consistently, unless you make some mistakes. And he sets that up to give himself a little bit of vision there, and once again, a W on the boss, so no one can contest the boss point. He stutter steps to essentially double his damage, while he has his Q up anyways. and he alternates his Q and his auto attack so that he can do essentially double damage. He reveals that first. He could jump over if he wants to, but instead he decides to just throw in a couple Qs and get some poke out. He's going to back up a little bit, but he tends to like to get closer whenever he uses his tire, especially in the higher ranks, because it's very common for people in the higher ranks to immediately kill the tire. In lower ranks, you can get away with throwing your tire out and almost never have to worry about it being destroyed. The tire's up to about 1300 damage, so it's still about half the health of a Junkrat. Now, he's great for clearing up stuff like this because he's so mobile and he can get from one side of the map to the other very quickly. So you'll definitely see that he spends a lot of time just covering deficits of his team. Covers deficits, he goes for picks, and that's the basic idea of what Gotfilth's Junkrat does. And again, he's disruptive, he's going for poke, and he doesn't really worry about much other than that. I mean, whenever his team wants to get out, he just drops down a trap in their escape route, and then they just leave. And that's all that he does, every time. So you can poke a little bit. He does have endless nades, which is very good against Samuros, assuming the Samuro isn't just attacking you. So his team decides to rotate around, and look at how many times he's throwing his Qs out just for vision. He's checking almost every bush at every time. So in this high level of play, anyone who's caught out of position pretty much is dead. And what he's doing is he's making it to where there's more opportunities that the enemies are caught out of position with his Ws, and less opportunities for his team to be caught out of position with his Q usage. So he's focusing more on utility and survivability than he is on just about everything else. He drops in a W so he can send Imperius into his team and also send the Samuro away. Gets a great ult hitting a huge amount of people. If he was level 20, that would have no cooldown. But in this case, I mean, Archon is Archon, and their team ends up getting rolled here. And this is where I would say a major downside about Junkrat is that he's not as impactful as a lot of other mages as far as pure damage numbers. In that fight, he had amazing ults, and he had an amazing setup for the team. Unfortunately, with all of that combined, Tassadar threw out one ability that did half the health of almost everyone on the team. That was so much more impactful than anything that Junkrat did that game, even though Junkrat did everything perfectly, and Tassadar literally just pressed one button. So there are definitely pros and cons about bringing Junkrat, and it's one of the reasons why I would say this build might not be the best build for people that want to start playing Junkrat in Storm League. If you are in competitive, it's a ton of utility, and your team generally has enough damage as it is if you're picking people out of position. In this case, they're just poking people right now. He has endless nades, so he's just gonna try to get those out as often as possible. He gets a nice knockback, but remember, this is actually a little bizarre. I'm surprised he didn't knock him, because it was right there, so it would have knocked him here. Surprised he didn't knock him back with his W, but they still end up leading to the kill. And I just also want to point out, I've brought this up on a lot, and you're going to see this a lot throughout the month, is the efficient use of time. You see that even when his team dies, he's always out trying to get value somewhere, and he's double soaking, he's working on camps, he's setting up bosses for his team, and he's constantly doing stuff. So this is a great example of like, hey, scoreboard doesn't matter that much. It's more so, again, like the picks that he's bringing to his team. He not only brought that pick to his team, but he also prevented an ult, and he's also jumping over here and quickly doing a bomb. So he's leading to another kill that he wouldn't have gotten. The Ancestral didn't actually save him there, but it certainly is going to allow him to stay in the fight a little bit longer. And once again, efficient use of time. What is he doing? He's looking at different areas that he can go, and he's trying to find more ways to get value. So they end up going for a boss here, and they have the objective. And that's all from his picks. So while his damage numbers are probably almost certainly lower than Tassadar and Raynor, even Samuro, it's the picks that's allowed his team to get the majority of the kills that they got, and it's the vision that's allowed his team to not get picked as often as the enemy team has. And from this point, with the deaths that they've caused, with the objective that's pushing in, they're going to take this and close out the game. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the build that he went. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons. I'm also going to talk about the current meta build that's being used, that a lot of other people are using anyways. And then I'm also going to talk about the build that I recommend specifically for Storm League. So at level 20, he ends up upgrading his ult so he can get that cooldown reduction. You only need to hit 3 people to have no cooldown on your ult. And it is something that you generally want to be focusing on when you are a level 20 Junkrat. You saw he waited, he hit 3 people, and he instantly had it again. It's actually your bread and butter once you hit level 20, is getting as many ults off as possible. So, with that being said, let's talk about his build, and then let's talk a little bit about the other talents that are very common in the competitive scene and in the later scenes for Junkrat. So let me see if I can pull up this one more time. Okay, so let's talk about these talents. So the build that I generally recommend for people, extra wound timers, and it did just get a buff, taste for explosion. That's going to give you consistent poke that you're probably going to be lacking if you end up going this build. And if you're not constantly having your team to follow up the picks, I don't know if this build is that valuable. Instead of Sticky Wicket, I've been recommending Dirty Trickster, because if people dive on you, this often gets them killed. It's also really good against Mosh Pit, which is very common right now. Slide into Mosh, you drop down a bunch of bombs and instantly kill the ETC, and you can kind of save yourself from a Mosh Pit. Riptire, I recommend in almost every situation. Then at this level, you can definitely go with any of the talents. If you need to triple soak, you go with Ripper Air, and if there's more of a point control map, gotta trap them all is very beneficial. Endless Nades is great no matter what build you're going. And then finally level 20, if they have an Uther healer, or they've got like a Rhaegar, something that just can't keep up with all the healing, Cannonball's really good. And in almost every other situation, Extra Oomph is incredible. And that's what I recommend in Storm League, because it gives you the best of both worlds. In competitive, I actually think this is the meta build now. Being able to constantly disrupt the enemies and lead to picks that you otherwise wouldn't get is incredibly powerful, and I definitely think that this is a great option for the competitive scene. And it gives all this extra utility. He kept his team in this game, and he also led to the wins, despite being down in almost every metric. This is purely his game. He dominated in EXP contribution, he dominated in siege damage, dominated in hero damage, and despite not having the kill numbers, he was the reason for almost every one of those kills. He participated in 100% of the kills that his team did during this game. So that is Junkrat high level hero guides. Guys, this is the start of the September every other day high-level hero guides. You guys are going to have a video every other day in September. 15 videos in September. All of which should be some awesome guides teaching you heroes that I might not get to as often when I'm making videos on my own, since I tend to play about the same, maybe fourth of the roster pool. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you guys get to see all the videos that are going to be popping up over the next month, because they are going to be a lot of fun. And again, I apologize for the little sponsor ad reads during the videos, but that's my kind of incentive for making sure that I can get out a video every other day in September. It's just a little incentive for myself, and they're going to be cool ones. I mean, they're not going to be like all the usual ones that you hear all the time, like audible.com, and I've talked about Honey a few too many times, so I think these are going to be some pretty fun ones that you guys haven't seen before, or at least I hope so. Thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out all of my other videos.